Good evening, I'm AJ Loading, and I'm going to present my Who Am I assignment. I'm going to share some things about myself, identifying who I am. I will be establishing 3 types of my identity, what my racial ethnicity is, my own viewpoint of myself socially, and how I see myself professionally, along with the cultural values of each identity and how my value fits within the values of the larger culture. Then I will discuss whether each of my identities value interdependent or independent and horizontal or vertical perceptions of myself to help interpret my views on the world around me. Last, I will apply the concept of intercultural boundary crossing, group affiliation, and identity formation to each identity. Also, how these processes work for others and how they work for me. I'm going to pinpoint now 3 different identities for myself. For my racial ethnicity, I distinguish myself as an American, that is English, Irish, and Puerto Rican. I get the English from my dad, the Puerto Rican from my mom, and Irish from both. Socially, I see myself included into the jock category since I have played sports from the start of 1st grade. Growing up, I had a religion background of Jehovah's Witnesses. I graduated for administrative assistant, and I'm looking to get in that line of work soon. Yet currently, I'm still studying in school. Now I'm going for my bachelor's degree in management, so I established my professional identity as an unemployed student. I'm going to now discuss my cultural values. I believe my values to be known as individualism, small power distance, strong uncertainty avoidance, and masculine. On page 51, the author explains that individualism emphasizes self-efficiency, individual responsibility, and personal determination. The author explains on page 55 that small power distance is tendency of valuing equal power distributions, equal rights and relations, and equitable rewards and punishments based on performance. For strong uncertainty avoidance, the author gives an explanation on page 57 of preferring clear procedures and conflict avoidance behaviors. The author justifies masculinity on page 58 as social gender roles that are clearly complementary and distinct. I also believe that each identity for me values independent and horizontal self-control, meaning that I view an individual as a unique entity with an individuated range of feelings, cognitions, and motivations. Also that I prefer informal, symmetrical interactions regardless of people's position, status, rank, or age, like the author described on page 66. When applying the concept of intercultural boundary crossing, group affiliation, and identity formation to each identity, the processes work for others by helping distinguish a lifetime identity transformation, along with how they perceive their own and others' group membership identity issues. The larger gap between 2 cultures, the higher degree of identity vulnerability they experience in a new culture, as discussed by the author on page 77 through 84. I believe my analyzation of these processes has helped in linking my social identity and my group affiliation with the American culture. I conclude that knowing each identity of myself will reflect what my cultural value patterns are and how my self-image is influenced by my larger cultural value patterns. Therefore, help me identify who I truly am, not only for myself, but for others. This also helps me understand others I am communicating with so that I know how to identify what they may consider important values. In addition to my cultural paper describing my cultural identity, I'm going to share 6 concepts I found that relate to me. These concepts I've seen that go with my identity include low context communication, self-enhancement style, gestures and illustrators, moderate contact cultural patterns, interdependent self-conflict lens, and using a situational approach during conflicts. I will discuss quotes on these concepts from the book to help explain them, along with how it applies to my cultural identity broadly. On page 109, the author discusses low-text communication in general. Low-text communication refers to communication patterns of direct, matter-of-fact tone, transparency, assertiveness, and sender-oriented values. I reveal my intentions clearly when interacting with others. As an American, I like to get to the point of what is being discussed. For instance, when I go to school and talk with others, I want to be direct. I want to get to the point of what is being discussed. So being direct with the other person and expressing only what is important to the conversation is important. As a jock in sports, conversation usually pertains to a goal or objective and has a certain meaning to the context being discussed. On page 112, the author discusses the self-enhancement style. This style emphasizes the importance of drawing attention to or exaggerating one's credentials, outstanding accomplishments, and special abilities. I see myself to do this because I like to share things about myself that I'm proud of. Many times I have shared my school accomplishments as a student, graduating from my AAS and now studying for my bachelor's degree. I have seen myself to share certain moments in sports events as a jock to express my athletic abilities. On page 127, the author shares ways of communicating to others. Some that stood out for me were gestures and illustrators. Gestures are culturally specific and significant forms of nonverbal communication. Illustrators are nonverbal hand gestures that we use along with the spoken message. They literally illustrate the verbal message. I usually use these ways to communicate with others in my everyday life. It is an easy shortcut for me over fully communicating at times. For instance, in school I have noticed certain gestures like nodding my head to show confirmation of what was said, or even shrugging my shoulders to teachers and other students when I don't know something. In sports I used illustrators like the peace sign and saying see you later, and showing the rock on hand gesture of the pointer and pinky fingers up with expressions such as woo and yeah to show an indication of congratulations to other teammates for doing something commendable. On page 131, the author talks about the moderate contact cultures, which is a blend of both low contact and high contact cultures. Low contact cultures often engage in little, if any, touching, preferring indirect eye gazes and speaking in a lower tone during communication, while high context cultures, they often look at each other in the eye directly, face each other, touch and or kiss each other, and speak in rather loud voices. With me, it depends on the situation, with how well I know the person I'm speaking with. Normally, I tend to use the low contact with unfamiliar people and high contact with people I know more. I've seen myself to use the high contact style in school with teachers, like shaking hands and direct eye contact because of their titles and importance to my education goals. Or even with teammates in sports, like high fives and hugs after big plays or winning a game. For the low contact aspect, I have had interactions with people that are unfamiliar and notice I don't look them in the eye much during communication and seem to be soft-spoken because of my shy characteristics. On page 168, the author explains of interdependent self-conflict lens, a person who often views conflict from a relational process lens, which emphasizes relationship and feeling issues, a win-win relational approach, in which feelings and faces can be both saved. I try looking through this type of conflict lens because I feel that negotiating or collaborating in a conflict situation is important and can help the situation from worsening. Some examples I have seen to this concept would be when I had different views on religions with others. Religion is a very sensitive subject, and conflicts have arisen where our different perspectives or differences clashed. I tried to keep an open mind and let them know I don't hold my beliefs above their own. Another example relates to my jock identity in sports event conflicts. I've had instances when certain situations were iffy on when someone from the other team hit me from the side or from behind once the play was already finished. Instead of reacting negatively and making the situation blow up, I tried to mention my concern with the action that took place and then try to justify with them on it not reoccurring. That we are both playing to be competitive, but we can still play fair. At times they didn't totally agree with my viewpoint, but it did help minimize the situation from escalating. On page 176, the author speaks of the situational approach during conflicts. It stresses the importance of the conflict topic and conflict situations shaping what conflict styles will be used in what types of relationships and in what context, or both of these. I tend to use different conflict styles that adapt to the situation at hand. I like to look at my relationship with that of the other person, and it factors into my decision of how I will approach the scenario, as I feel that each conflict style seems to work better than others depending on who and what is involved. For instance, if I had conflicts with a girlfriend I'm dating, then I may choose to use certain conflict styles to save face with her. This could include the avoiding style and or obliging style. While I have seen to observe conflicts with teachers on projects or grade misunderstandings and use compromising or collaborating styles, as it is not a relationship on a personal level. These are the 6 concepts that I found throughout the chapter. I shared the author's quotes that explained each of them, along with how they related to me in general, and also how they pertain towards 2 cultural identities I shared in my previous Who I Am paper, and some instances I've used these concepts. Thank you.